We are now a few days into the new year, 2026. And if you have pregnancy on your vision board for 2026, I thought I would make a little video talking about what I would do if I were in your shoes and I was thinking about conception this year. How could I implement some practices that would support my health and support my fertility? So when I was thinking about this, I'm obviously keen on the preconception period. I have a course that I put out late last year all about the foundations of fertility, where I go through kind of those important things that will help give you more confidence as you approach fertility and the conception journey. Because it really is an important time to consider before you are getting pregnant. I know there are some people who just want to jump into it kind of with the unknown, kind of try and see what happens. And that can be a beautiful thing, of course. But I do think there is also value in kind of focusing on your health a little bit during this time too, because we do know that our health of the mother and also the father, as we conceive and we try to promote a pregnancy, can really influence things. It can influence, how likely we are to fall pregnant. It can influence pregnancy factors, outcomes in pregnancy, even, things like our risk of having complications like preeclampsia or developing gestational diabetes during pregnancy. So it is important to, I think, enter pregnancy in a strong health state. This journey can also come with so much stress and anxiety and fear. So I also understand someone not wanting to really think about it too deeply, because it can really stir up more anxieties when you're like hyper focused on your fertility. So it's a balance. And I feel like we all have to kind of decide that for ourselves, like how much we do feel like we can focus on our fertility and, support ourselves, but not getting obsessive about it or having it create more anxiety throughout the process. So I do think it's important to kind of check in with yourself where you're at, what's driving your anxiety, what's driving your behaviors. My intention with the video here is to kind of show some things that I think are important to implement during, really any time, but especially if you are thinking of conceiving in the next year or so, to feel more like your best and potentially, support your pregnancy better. So when I was thinking about like some words or some things that come to mind when I'm thinking about preconception, one was promoting safety, nourishment, and flow. So, safety, because the body really needs to feel safe in order for our reproductive functions to be optimized. So, when we are feeling like hyper stressed, we know, or undernourished, we know our body can actually shut down our hormone functions, can shut off our ovulation. And there are many impacts of sort of long-term stress or long-term kind of depletion on our fertility processes. So I think this comes down to kind of reflecting and feeling like, do you feel safe and do you feel like you have like space in your life to have a baby, to hold a pregnancy? Do you feel, you're able to take that on? And I feel like when we reflect on that, some things might come up of like, oh, actually, I think I'm working too hard. I've got too many things going on. Like if I were to have a baby in my life, I wouldn't be able to keep up those things. So what I usually suggest is to already start living like you have that baby, already start adjusting your life to what you imagine it might be like with a child. Obviously, maybe not 100%, but start to wean out the things that are maybe not as important or not necessary, setting up the systems and prioritizing the things that are going to make your life feel more stress-free, easy, and space for a little one to be carried around all the time by your side. I feel like that's something really important to help kind of open up that area for a child to come into your life. So then nourishment is also something that I think is really important. And that's a lot of like sort of the diet, like what we are nourishing our bodies with in terms of food and nutrition. And when I'm thinking about nutrition for my preconception patients and even myself, for one, I'm looking at like, is somebody adequately fueling? Are they eating enough to make sure that they have the resources that they need for their body to function? And are they potentially overeating? You know, I feel like sometimes people can go on either side of the spectrum of like not eating enough or eating too much, and both of those we know can set us up for more negative health outcomes. Generally looking at your meals, are you having 3 good decent sized meals a day? Are your plate balanced? So do you have a protein source at each meal, an adequate amount of protein, maybe around like 20, 30, even 40 grams per meal is where we're kind of looking at to support our energy levels, our metabolism, and have our hormones thrive a bit more. And then also making sure you have fiber at each meal. So, fiber is coming from our plant foods. So, anything from like our fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, to leafy greens, beans and legumes, whole grains, all these things have fiber in them. And it can be helpful to kind of get a sense of like what are high fiber foods, how much fiber is in different foods that you enjoy, to try and aim for, they say at least like 30 grams throughout the day. So maybe that's like 10 grams per meal or like 8 grams per meal, and then you're having a few snacks as well. When it comes to fertility, like our fruits and vegetables are so important, as well as things like nuts and seeds. These are going to supply us with a lot of those micronutrients and antioxidants that we know support things like our egg quality, our sperm quality. So even adding in like an extra serving of fruit per day, 2 servings of berries or something, having a handful of nuts, those simple little switches can actually make a big difference. We have research to show that eating like a handful of nuts can really significantly improve things like sperm parameters. The other one I'll highlight is fatty fish. So, omega-3 fatty acids we get mostly from eating fish. There's a small amount in like walnuts and ground flax and stuff, chia seeds, but the higher bioavailable forms are actually in fish. So, especially if you're not eating fish, maybe you're a vegetarian or vegan, it's really important to then supplement a omega-3 fatty acid, because you just probably are not getting enough of those omega-3 fatty acids, and they're really important for our hormone function, for our inflammatory levels. And then when you're pregnant, they're really important for the baby's brain development. The other thing with diet is focusing on eating more iron rich foods, especially from the female side. So, mostly from the female side, because pregnancy really can deplete our iron stores. So, it's important to test your iron for one, know your iron status in this preconception period. That's maybe one of the most important nutrients that I think we should test in preconception, and correct before we get pregnant, because it can have really significant outcomes on the pregnancy. So from the diet side, like trying to make sure you're eating iron rich foods, whether that's, meats, chicken, poultry, red meat. I mean, research does show that eating too much red meat and processed meat actually has a negative impact on overall health and fertility. But that red meat and stuff often does have like the higher sources of iron. So that's where I think it can be a little bit individual based off of your, what is your iron status. It can be more helpful to add in those higher density iron rich foods, if you are on more of the iron deficient side. So the other word that I mentioned was flow. And the reason I chose flow is because, especially from like the Chinese medicine side, circulation and having the energy being flowing is so key for our fertility. So a lot of acupuncture, we're focusing on promoting flow and circulation and movement in the body, trying to move that body every day, whether that's like going for a walk outside. Outside is great because then you're also pairing it with getting natural sunlight, which is going to be really helpful in regulating for our circadian rhythm, which kind of like is the master regulator of all our other hormone functions. So I love pairing those two together, trying to get in outdoor walks daily as much as you can. General exercise is also important. So like 3 times a week, trying to do like a 20-30 minute workout, strength training, Pilates workout, kind of whatever you feel best doing and what you're actually going to do. At the end of the day, a lot of this is like what is going to work for you, right? Because there's obviously like the ideal of what we could all be doing in terms of our health, but depending on our lifestyle, we may or may not be able to actually execute that. So I think getting honest about that is important. And I always say with like habit changes, like doing something small is better than trying to do something big that you're not going to be able to keep up with. So if you're really finding that you're struggling with like getting outside for a walk, like reducing that barrier first and be like, hey, I'm just literally walking down my street, or I'm literally just walking to the end of my driveway to start, and doing that consistently adds up over time and will make us more likely to be able to get to our eventual goal. It's that like consistency, the promise to ourselves, that really ends up leading to those long-term sustainable changes. Now I want to talk a bit about stress management and sleep, because these ones kind of go together. And I feel like infertility, when we say like you just need to stress less, it's like it's such an annoying thing to hear, and people are like, yeah, how do I do that? My work is so stressful. I try and like read a book each night, or I'm trying to incorporate things that I like. And something that really changed the way I view stress and like talk about it now with patients is something I read from the book The Stress Prescription. She broke down stress into our body going through 4 different stages of arousal. The first 2 are like our aroused state. So acute stress is like our red zone. It's like when something really intense is happening, we all know that feeling of like being very acutely stressed. That usually kind of recovers after that stressful event is over. Then we have sort of our cognitive baseline load. So this is like stress that we're maybe feeling just with work, throughout the day, just kind of like our daily kind of stressors that are coming and going. And then we have the 2 more restorative states. So one being our kind of like restful zone, our restoration state. And this might be like when we watch TV, when we're reading a book, we're doing something kind of pleasurable for ourselves. So we're relaxed, but we're actually not restoring. And it's the last level called deep rest, where our nervous system and our body actually starts to heal and our cellular processes can rejuvenate. And this really only happens in our deep sleep, when we're getting good quality deep sleep, and in engaging in practices like mind body things. So meditation, breath work, these sort of states have been shown to activate deep rest. And we actually see that people who meditate and who have these practices require less sleep, because they are processing, like during our sleep, we're actually processing our emotions. We're processing what we've been through throughout the day. And meditation and these deep rest kind of mind body practices also allow us to tap into that. So that's my case for trying to implement some sort of deep rest practice. If you want to start just focusing on sleep, can be one way to do that, by having a very consistent, good quality sleep. Deep sleep happens more at the beginning stages of the night. They say like before 12 p.m. So trying to go to bed earlier would be one way to get more into that deep rest, of trying to implement some sort of meditation, breath work, mind body practice into your life, we know can be so beneficial. And so that's my argument why just taking a bath or just reading your book or just watching your TV, you're actually not truly healing your nervous system by doing those things. There are a few things that I would focus on in this period. I hope it was helpful. If you're looking to dive more into preconception, you can check out my fertility course online.